On December 3, 2024, South Korean President Yoon Seok-yeol made a momentous and controversial decision to declare martial law, citing the need to arrest 99 individuals he accused of being spies for the Chinese Communist Party. This unprecedented move stirred significant public outcry and set off a series of events that would ultimately lead to his impeachment and arrest in the following months. Event timeline: December 3, 2024. President Yoon declared martial law and deployed military forces around the National Assembly to facilitate the arrests he deemed necessary. However, this declaration lasted only a few hours as lawmakers from the opposition managed to lift the martial law and resume legislative activities. The swift backlash against Yoon's decision was palpable, with many viewing it as an overreach of power. December 14, 2024. In response to the martial law declaration, the National Assembly voted to impeach Yoon on charges of rebellion and abuse of power. The impeachment was spearheaded by opposition parties who claimed that Yoon's actions undermined democratic principles and sought to suppress dissent. January 15, 2025. Following the impeachment, Yoon was detained by South Korea's anti-corruption agency and police during a massive operation at his presidential residence. This marked the first time in South Korean history that a sitting president was apprehended while in office. The operation was a culmination of efforts to hold Yoon accountable for his martial law declaration. Major events and reactions. Yoon's martial law declaration was framed by him as a necessary measure to protect the state from an anti-state opposition that was allegedly exploiting its legislative majority to obstruct his policies. He maintained that the rule of law had collapsed in South Korea and that he was acting in the nation's best interests. However, critics, including legal experts and political opponents, described Yoon's actions as a blatant abuse of power. Many believed that the martial law declaration was a thinly veiled attempt to silence dissent and maintain control over the government amid growing opposition. During his time in custody, Yoon's supporters rallied outside the anti-corruption agency, expressing their discontent and calling for his release. Demonstrators carried banners proclaiming their loyalty to Yoon and decrying the impeachment as politically motivated persecution. Concurrently, opponents of Yoon held counter-protests demanding justice and accountability for his actions. Inside the detention center, Yoon faced serious charges, including potential rebellion, which could carry severe penalties, including life imprisonment or even the death penalty depending on the outcomes of legal proceedings. His legal team argued that the anti-corruption agency lacked jurisdiction to investigate a sitting president for rebellion, asserting that the arrest warrant was invalid. Information consolidation and key points. Multiple sources reported that Yoon's martial law declaration was perceived as an extreme measure aimed at consolidating power. The political landscape in South Korea became increasingly polarized as supporters and critics of Yoon clashed in public demonstrations. The opposition interpreted the situation as a critical juncture for democracy in South Korea, while Yoon's camp viewed the impeachment and subsequent arrest as a politically motivated attack on their leadership. Despite Yoon's insistence that his actions were justified, the backlash against him was swift and severe. By January 2025, the political crisis had escalated to the point where the Constitutional Court was tasked with reviewing the impeachment case. The court's decision would determine whether Yoon would be formally removed from office or reinstated. Conclusion: President Yoon Seok-yeol's declaration of martial law and the subsequent political turmoil that ensued highlighted deep divisions within South Korean society and government. The events of December 2024 and January 2025 not only challenged Yoon's leadership but also raised significant questions about the state of democracy in South Korea. As the nation grappled with the implications of this crisis, the future political landscape remained uncertain, with potential long-term consequences for governance and civil liberties in the country. The unfolding developments served as a stark reminder of the fragile nature of democratic institutions and the importance of upholding the rule of law. The events surrounding South Korean President Yoon Seok-yeol's declaration of martial law and subsequent arrest highlight a significant political crisis. The counterintuitive information in this situation involves the perception of Yoon's actions and the responses they elicited from various factions within South Korea. 1. Martial law as a defensive measure. Yoon claimed that his declaration of martial law was a necessary response to what he described as an anti-state opposition, suggesting that it was a defensive measure against a perceived threat to governance. This framing is counterintuitive because martial law is typically associated with authoritarianism and repression. Yet Yoon positioned it as a legitimate act of governance aimed at preserving order. 2. Public support versus opposition. While the declaration of martial law was met with widespread condemnation from opposition parties and civil society groups, it also galvanized a significant base of support for Yoon among conservative factions. His supporters rallied in defense of his actions, viewing the martial law declaration as a necessary step to combat what they perceived as legislative overreach and a threat to the nation's stability. This divergence in public sentiment illustrates how political narratives can polarize public opinion, leading to starkly contrasting interpretations of the same event. 3. Impeachment and rebellion charges. The rapid transition from martial law to impeachment is another counterintuitive aspect. Yoon's declaration, intended to solidify his authority, instead resulted in his political downfall. The opposition quickly mobilized to leverage his actions against him, leading to his impeachment on rebellion charges just days after the martial law was lifted. This illustrates the precariousness of political power and how attempts to assert authority can backfire dramatically. 4. Legal authority and political legitimacy. Yoon's assertion that the anti-corruption agency lacked the authority to investigate his actions reflects a broader tension between legal frameworks and political legitimacy. His defense hinged on the argument that his presidential powers exempted him from scrutiny, yet this claim runs counter to democratic principles that hold leaders accountable to the law. The pushback from the anti-corruption agency and the parliament illustrates the complexities of power dynamics within a democratic system, where legal structures can both empower and challenge authority. 5. Perception of rule of law. Yoon's lament that the rule of law in South Korea had completely collapsed after his arrest can be seen as ironic. While he positioned himself as a defender of the law, his actions leading to martial law appear to have undermined the very legal principles he invoked. The counterintuitive notion that a president can simultaneously claim to uphold the law while enacting measures that are perceived as lawless highlights the contradictions often present in political rhetoric. 6. Social movements and protests. The protests that erupted following Yoon's arrest reveal another layer of counterintuitive dynamics. Activists and supporters of Yoon framed their protests as a defense of democracy and the rule of law, despite the fact that many viewed his martial law declaration as a direct threat to those very principles. This illustrates how groups can mobilize around contrasting interpretations of democratic values, leading to conflicting social movements. 7. International implications. Yoon's detention and the political turmoil in South Korea raised concerns among international observers regarding the stability of the Korean government. Ironically, while Yoon sought to project strength and stability through his actions, the backlash ultimately exposed vulnerabilities that could have broader implications for South Korea's international standing and internal political cohesion. In summary, the situation surrounding Yoon Seok-yeol's martial law declaration and subsequent arrest presents a complex interplay of political motivations and public perceptions that often contradict traditional expectations. The dichotomy of viewing authoritarian measures as protective, the rapid shift from power to impeachment, and the contrasting interpretations of legality and legitimacy underscore the intricate nature of political crises in democratic contexts. In examining the recent events surrounding South Korean President Yoon Seok-yeol's declaration of martial law and subsequent arrest, several important yet often overlooked aspects emerge which carry significant implications for South Korea's political landscape and democratic integrity. 1. The context of martial law declaration. Yoon's declaration of martial law on December 3, 2024 was unprecedented in modern South Korean history. while many reports focus on the immediate political fallout. The context in which this declaration occurred is crucial. Yoon justified the martial law as a necessary measure against what he termed an anti-state opposition party that was obstructing governance. This framing of the opposition as a threat to national security is significant as it reflects a growing trend among leaders globally to invoke security concerns to suppress dissent. The implications of this are profound. It raises questions about the boundaries of executive power and the potential for authoritarianism under the guise of national security. 2. The role of the Anti-Corruption Agency. The involvement of the Anti-Corruption Agency ACAO in Yoon's arrest is another critical point that may not receive sufficient attention. The ACAO's actions represent a shift in the balance of power within South Korea's political framework. Traditionally, the executive branch has wielded significant influence over law enforcement agencies. The ACAO's aggressive pursuit of Yoon, who had previously sought to bolster its powers to combat corruption, indicates a potential backlash against executive overreach. This scenario emphasizes the importance of independent regulatory bodies in maintaining checks and balances, particularly in politically charged environments. 3. Public sentiment and polarization. The public response to Yoon's actions reveals deep societal divisions. While Yoon's supporters rallied to defend him, viewing his impeachment and arrest as politically motivated persecution, a substantial portion of the population sees these events as a necessary step towards restoring democracy and accountability. The rallies, marked by passionate displays of loyalty and dissent, underscore the polarization within South Korean society. This division is indicative of broader trends in democracies worldwide, where populist leaders can cultivate fervent followings while simultaneously alienating significant segments of the populace. The long-term ramifications of this polarization could destabilize political discourse and hinder effective governance. 4. The Constitutional Court's role. The ongoing impeachment proceedings and the Constitutional Court's ultimate decision are pivotal in determining the future of South Korea's political climate. The court's role in adjudicating the legitimacy of Yoon's impeachment will set a precedent for the extent of legislative oversight over the executive branch. Should the court uphold the impeachment, it would reinforce the principle that no one is above the law, a cornerstone of democratic governance. Conversely, a ruling in favor of Yoon could embolden similar actions by future leaders, potentially eroding democratic norms and institutions. 5. International implications. Another often overlooked aspect is the international ramifications of Yoon's actions. South Korea's geopolitical position, particularly in relation to North Korea and its alliance with the United States, complicates the narrative. The US and other allies are likely watching closely, as instability in South Korea could affect regional security dynamics. Yoon's martial law could be interpreted by adversaries as a sign of weakness or internal strife, potentially emboldening hostile actions from North Korea. Additionally, how the international community responds to Yoon's arrest and the subsequent political turmoil may influence South Korea's foreign relations and domestic perceptions of legitimacy. 6. The future of South Korean democracy. The events surrounding Yoon's martial law declaration and subsequent arrest pose significant questions about the future of South Korean democracy. The crisis has exposed vulnerabilities within the democratic framework, particularly regarding the resilience of institutions against political maneuvering. Observers should closely monitor how civil society, political parties, and governmental institutions react in the coming months. The ability of South Korea to navigate this crisis will likely shape not only its immediate political future but also its long-term democratic integrity. Conclusion. The unfolding political crisis involving President Yoon Seok-yeol carries profound implications that extend beyond immediate political consequences. The interplay of martial law, public sentiment, institutional power dynamics, and international relations paints a complex picture of a democracy at a crossroads. Understanding these nuanced elements is vital for grasping the larger narrative of political struggle and resilience in South Korea. As such, these overlooked details should be given greater emphasis in discussions surrounding this significant historical moment. 1. Declaration of martial law and its implications. The announcement of martial law by President Yoon Seok-yeol on December 3, 2024 aimed at detaining individuals accused of being Chinese Communist spies, represents a significant escalation in South Korea's political landscape. This action not only highlights the government's concerns over national security and foreign influence but also raises critical questions about the limits of executive power and the implications for civil liberties. The brief duration of the martial law, lasting only hours, indicates a contentious political environment where such measures are met with swift legislative pushback. This instance serves as a critical case study in the balance between state security and democratic governance. 2. Political backlash and impeachment proceedings. The rapid progression from the declaration of martial law to Yoon's impeachment underscores the intense political polarization in South Korea. The impeachment driven by the opposition reflects a broader struggle against perceived authoritarianism and abuse of power. The events following the martial law declaration exemplify how legislative bodies can act as a check on executive overreach, reinforcing the importance of institutional checks and balances in a democracy. The implications of this impeachment process extend beyond Yoon's presidency, potentially influencing future political dynamics and the public's trust in governmental institutions. 3. Public response and societal divisions. The public's reaction to Yoon's actions, including protests both for and against him, signifies deep societal divisions within South Korea. Yoon's supporters rallied in significant numbers, highlighting a faction of the populace that perceives his struggles as political persecution rather than legitimate accountability. Conversely, the opposition's calls for justice emphasize a demand for accountability and adherence to democratic norms. This dichotomy reflects broader societal issues, including the role of populism in South Korean politics and the challenges of fostering a cohesive national identity amidst political strife. 4. Legal and constitutional considerations. The legal ramifications of Yoon's martial law declaration and subsequent impeachment present critical questions regarding the interpretation of South Korean law and the authority of various governmental bodies. Yoon's defense, which argues against the legitimacy of the anti-corruption agency's investigation and the impeachment process, raises fundamental issues about the rule of law and the accountability of public officials. The Constitutional Court's eventual decision on the impeachment will have lasting implications for the interpretation of executive powers and the frameworks that govern political conduct in South Korea. This situation serves as a pivotal moment for South Korean jurisprudence and may set precedents for how future administrations navigate similar crises. 1. The martial law in the Philippines, 1972. On September 21, 1972, President Ferdinand Marcos declared martial law in the Philippines ostensibly to suppress rising crime and insurgency. This move allowed him to rule by decree, effectively silencing dissent and suspending civil liberties. Marcos used this power to arrest political opponents, suppress media freedom, and extend his presidency beyond constitutional limits. The declaration led to widespread human rights violations, including torture, disappearances, and extrajudicial killings. The martial law lasted until 1981, but its effects on Philippine society and politics are still felt today. 2. The Reichstag fire and the Enabling Act, 1933. In Germany, the Reichstag fire occurred on February 27, 1933, shortly after Adolf Hitler was appointed Chancellor. The fire was used by the Nazis as a pretext to push through the Reichstag fire decree, which suspended civil liberties and allowed for the arrest of political opponents. This was followed by the Enabling Act passed on March 23, 1933. Which gave Hitler the power to enact laws without parliamentary consent, effectively establishing a legal dictatorship. This set the stage for the totalitarian regime that would follow and led to widespread persecution and the eventual outbreak of World War II. 3. The state of emergency in Egypt, 2013. Following the ousting of President Mohamed Morsi in July 2013, Egypt's interim government declared a state of emergency in response to widespread protests and civil unrest. This state of emergency allowed the government to impose curfews, restrict public gatherings, and detain individuals without charges. The military and police used this authority to crack down on protests, resulting in violent clashes and significant casualties. The state of emergency was extended multiple times and has been criticized for facilitating human rights abuses, including arbitrary detention and suppression of free speech. Future outlook: predictions for South Korea following the martial law declaration. The unprecedented events surrounding South Korean President Yoon Seok-yeol's declaration of martial law and his subsequent impeachment have set the stage for significant political, social, and economic changes in South Korea. Here are several predictions about the future outlook for the nation in the wake of these events. 1. Political reconfiguration. The political landscape in South Korea is likely to undergo substantial reconfiguration as a result of Yoon's impeachment and detention. The ruling People Power Party (PPP) may face internal divisions as factions emerge either in support of Yoon or in favor of moving on from his leadership. The Democratic Party, having spearheaded the impeachment, may gain increased influence, potentially leading to a shift in legislative priorities and policies. Moreover, upcoming elections, both local and national, will likely become battlegrounds for opposing views on governance, democracy, and the rule of law. As public sentiment fluctuates in response to the situation, new political movements could emerge, possibly leading to the formation of new parties or coalitions that challenge the status quo. 2. Public sentiment and social movements. The polarization of public opinion is expected to intensify, with supporters of Yoon rallying against what they perceive as political persecution and opponents advocating for accountability and the restoration of democratic norms. This division could lead to increased protests and social unrest as various groups mobilize around their respective causes. Social movements focused on civil rights, anti-corruption, and government accountability may gain traction, leading to a more active and engaged citizenry. The youth in particular may become increasingly politicized, demanding transparency and reform in the wake of perceived abuses of power. 3. Legal precedents and institutional integrity. The legal ramifications of Yoon's actions and the subsequent impeachment process will likely influence South Korea's judicial landscape. The Constitutional Court's handling of Yoon's case will set important precedents regarding the limits of presidential power and the authority of the anti-corruption agency. A ruling that upholds the impeachment could reinforce the principle that no one is above the law, while a dismissal could embolden future leaders to overstep constitutional boundaries. Additionally, the effectiveness and independence of South Korea's anti-corruption institutions will be under scrutiny. Calls for reform may arise to enhance their capabilities and ensure they operate without political interference. This could lead to a stronger legal framework aimed at preventing future abuses of power. 4. Economic implications. The political turmoil may have significant economic consequences. Investor confidence could wane in the short term, leading to fluctuations in the stock market and economic instability. The business community may call for political stability to foster a conducive environment for investment and growth. Long-term economic implications will depend on how the new political landscape shapes economic policies. If the Democratic Party or any new coalition prioritizes progressive reforms, South Korea could see shifts in labor laws, environmental policies, and social welfare programs. Conversely, a resurgence of conservative policies may focus on deregulation and fostering business interests. 5. International relations and regional stability. Yoon's controversial actions and the subsequent political fallout may affect South Korea's international standing and its relations with key allies, particularly the United States. The Biden administration may reassess its approach to South Korea, focusing on strengthening democratic institutions while ensuring that strategic interests in the region are maintained. Relations with North Korea, already tense, may face further complications as the political situation in the South evolves. A change in leadership could lead to a shift in diplomatic strategies impacting future negotiations regarding denuclearization and peace on the Korean Peninsula. 6. Media and digital landscape. The events surrounding the martial law declaration have highlighted the role of media and digital platforms in shaping public discourse. As traditional media faces challenges, digital and social media will likely play an increasingly significant role in mobilizing public opinion and facilitating grassroots movements. Expect a rise in alternative media outlets and citizen journalism as individuals seek to bypass traditional narratives and present their perspectives. This shift could lead to a more fragmented media landscape where misinformation and polarized narratives coexist, complicating efforts to achieve consensus on national issues. Conclusion. The aftermath of Yoon Seok-yeol's declaration of martial law and his subsequent impeachment marks a pivotal moment in South Korean history. The nation stands at a crossroads where the choices made by political leaders, social movements, and the public will shape its future. As South Korea navigates this complex landscape, the interplay between governance, public sentiment, and institutional integrity will be crucial in determining the trajectory of democracy and stability in the coming years. The road ahead may be fraught with challenges, but it also presents opportunities for reform and renewal.